Hi there, Coach Arthur from City Gym here, and in this video we're going to talk about the bench press. So the first one we're going to talk about is the bar path. And specifically people who, when they come down to their chest, press the bar up in a straight line, a straight vertical line, or for example, pressing straight up for the first half of the ascent, then pushing back, right? That is incorrect. What you want to do is, when you're on the chest, you want to push up, but you also want to push back and then straight up to finish the lockout. The second common fault I see in the bench press is either not using leg drive or using leg drive incorrectly. Not using leg drive is exactly what it sounds like. Not using your legs to help stabilize yourself, and as a result you leak energy and leak force production in the bench press. So how that would be seen is just someone kind of lying down on the bench, and as they're performing the movement, just kind of their legs being kind of loose and not contracted throughout the movement. And then in terms of using leg drive incorrectly, what you'll see a lot of the time is people pushing into the floor and sort of creating just vertical force. Problem with that is that it increases the tendency for buttocks to lift off the bench and doesn't transfer well to the upper body to assist in the press. So what you want to do instead is to produce force horizontally, right? So if you imagine almost like as you're lying down on the bench, driving like as if you're trying to push the floor away from you, to the point where if you didn't have a solid grip on the floor with your shoe, that your leg would actually lift off and you do almost like a leg extension movement. What that will do then is that will help keep you stable, and it will also help transmit force into the upper body and increase your force production in the bottom half of the ascent on the bench press. The next common fault that I see in people performing the bench press is either touching the bar too high or too low on their chest. I'm going to go over touching too low first, because that's a more common one, right? So if you imagine as you are descending on the bench press and you just, instead of touching on your sternum, they touch just a little bit too low, and as a result then their elbow is behind their wrist, not underneath the wrist where we would like it to be. And as a result then, they're going to be more inclined to press the bar away from them as they come off the chest, and as a result then fail a lift that they may otherwise have been able to complete. So what you do then is cue them to touch a little bit higher on their chest and aim to keep a position where their elbow remains directly underneath the wrist throughout the movement. Then touching too high is the same idea, less common. So essentially if you imagine touching here, and as a result, again, a less than ideal forearm position created. And then that feeds into, as I say, a poor elbow position. And then just on that then, sometimes what you'll see is when coming off the chest, the lifter will either flare their elbows excessively, right, which we don't want, or they'll actually, as they come off the chest, they'll excessively tuck their elbows, right? Which is again, not ideal for producing the most amount of force that we can on the bench press, and it's also likely to lead to medial elbow pain. The next common fault that we see on the bench press is a lack of tightness. So again, this comes back a little bit to the leg drive that we were discussing earlier on, where the legs aren't tight, and as a result you're leaking force through the lower body. But in addition to that, a number of components to having the correct level of tightness in the bench press. The first one, and probably the most important one, is that you retract and depress your scapulae. So your scapulae, your shoulder blades in layman's terms. So instead of just lying down on the bench press with your scapulae neutral position, if you like, what we want to do is retract, so pull them together, and depress, pull them down. What that does then is that contracts all your upper back muscles, such as your lats, your traps, your rhomboids, teres major and minor, these kind of muscles. It also helps to elevate the rib cage, creating a slight arch, which is also going to help you to bench press more weight. But the primary reason we do it is to actually keep our shoulders in a healthier position. If our scapulae are level on the bench, as we come down, what's going to happen is the head of our humerus is going to move into a position known as humeral glide. So we want to avoid that as much as possible. So that's why we retract and depress, right? So that our shoulders stay in a nice position throughout the bench press. So to recap, there's two reasons we do that. So it's to contract our back muscles so that they can stabilize us during the lift, and it's to help keep our shoulders healthy. The second thing is what we would term pulling with the lats. There's two parts to this. So the first one is, so when you unrack the bar, that you use the lats to pull it out, like you're doing just a terminal elbow extension, coupled with a straight arm pull down, so that again, you maintain your arch position, your scapular position, and you're keeping your lats tight. So it's almost like you're pulling your shoulders down towards your hip, creating more tightness, more stability. And then the last one then is breathing. What I recommend on the bench press is that, in contrast with the squat and the deadlift, where you try to belly breathe, if you like, where you're trying to draw in as much air as you can into your stomach, push out into your belt, and create stability that way. In contrast with that, what I recommend is that you breathe into your thoracic cavity here to help elevate your arch a little bit more and keep you stable through the rib cage, where the bar is going to be landing in the bottom position of the bench press, and then press up from there. The next common fault I see in the bench press is incorrect wrist position. And this usually stems from incorrect bar placement in the hand. What's going on here is, instead of placing the bar closer to the heel of the palm of the hand and then wrapping the fingers and thumb around and then squeezing the bar to help keep the wrist straight, what happens is the lifter holds the bar up closer to the top of the palm of the hand, and then what happens then is that as they're going through the movement, their wrist bends back, or their hand bends back, so that there's an increased strain on the wrist. To prevent that, what you do is you cue them, bring the bar down to the heel of the palm of the hand, wrap the fingers and thumb around the bar, and squeeze the bar, okay? Oftentimes you'll find that it's not a quick fix and will take time, because they've become used to that position. They've actually got strong in that position, so they're going to be slow to revert to this new position. They're going to find it hard to stabilize their wrist, but stick with it. Maybe reduce the weight for a little while if need be, and let the muscles of the forearm catch up, because long term it will lead to, well, it'll lead to a stronger bench press wrist position, and it'll lead to healthier wrists as well.